Hi, Mage fans, Puka here. Today we present to you the second recovered episode recorded by Terry before his passing, guest starring Michael Mercere to discuss in depth the Houses of Hermes. The discussion ranges across Mage and Ars Magica alike, but hopefully the story ideas and notions contained herein will be helpful to you for enriching the tradition in your game. Only the first handful of houses were covered, so if this episode is well received, I may record a follow-up with Michael in which I will wax poetic about House Shea. But in the meantime, here comes the audio.
Hi, Mage fans. This is your host, Terry Robinson with Mage the Podcast. And joining me today is senior Hermetic correspondent Michael Mercere, who you may know from his work on the Storyteller Vault. And I should have pulled up the title of that book first.
It is Riddle of the Sphinx.
Thank you so much. And Michael is joining today because in the wake of the Ars Magica Kickstarter, Michael and I were just going, tee-hee-hee, Hermetics, and kind of agreed that we wanted to do something that brought them a little bit more into what they were like in the world of darkness. And I originally remember reading the Order of Hermes tradition book and going, this is too many houses. And then by the time I was done going, this isn't enough houses. And this episode is interesting because it kind of has 3 or 4 different sources that we're going to consult. One are the canon Mage texts. The big ones there are going to be Tradition Book Order of Hermes, which is the revised version. The Order of Hermes Tradition Book, which went out around 1A2A. We get a little bit of information, although not really at the house level in Lore of the Traditions, but also drawing on Book of Secrets, Book of Madness, Book of Shadows, Book of Mirrors, any of these books that have numerous timelines. And in addition to that, if there's a blank space, we're going to add some stuff from Ars Magica, which I get to do extensively when we talk about House Tremere or House Tremere, if you prefer, as well as just some stuff we've made up because Mage is fun. And what is Hermeticism if not stealing from other people's stuff and then claiming that there's a lot of a lot of numerology going on?
The only thing I can think of besides that is either diablerie, diabolism, or vampirism.
Yeah,
It's also that.
They're always right there. It's the big red Hermetic button that you always want to press. No one should press it, but someone's always pressing it. So in addition to that, we will talk about our favorite houses that didn't quite make the cut as major houses in World of Darkness, such as House Jerbaton or Yerbaton or Bjorner. We will also, again, be frequently making things up. We don't have information on most of the houses' primis. No, primi is already plural. Most of the primi of the houses. There we go. That sounds more natural. And we're just going to make it up. And kind of the key things that I kept in mind is every Hermetic has a chosen word that they pick during their apprenticeship at its end or near its end that kind of epitomizes their goal of magic. Words are complicated, though. And likewise, so is the Order of Hermes. Fire can represent pain, warmth, light, cooking, inspiration, and a dozen other things. So have fun with that. I think one of my favorite things with a Hermetic nemesis is to make sure that their word is kind of double-edged. The Hermetics are driven, and the Hermetics tend to inspire other Hermetics. I would consider Hermetics kind of the definition of insatiable in a lot of ways. They represent kind of the best of humanity in terms of striving, but also in terms of hubris. And finally, kind of their methods work. Long incantations may seem stupid, but they sure do seem effective. To me, I try to represent this systematically in terms of Hermetics being very willing to use the difficulty modifier of -1 to -3 for spending extra time on something, as well as liberal use of attribute plus ability, usually being esoteric or high ritual, to get what they want. And everyone loves to hate the Hermetics. I don't think Mage particularly dislikes them, but they definitely are a group where their time of greatest power is behind them unless they do a lot of work. So they may no longer have the ability to just kind of dominate the world around them as they once did at a society scale, but they are still quite a force within the traditions. They are still quite a force within the awakened world. And if you had a game with the Ascension truce between the traditions and the technocracy, these would be, to kind of quote someone, the brightest minds with the sharpest elbows in terms of seeing what that world looked like. So Michael, what are kind of your starting thoughts when thinking about the Hermetics?
Piggybacking off what you just said, I think that their influence over the consensus is probably one of their defining factors. I think that besides the technocracy, I think for most people, they're probably have the most accessible paradigm. Everybody's steeped in wizardliness, whether it's technically how the Order of Hermes does it. It kind of rubs off on anything having to do with the occult. The Order of Hermes kind of rubs off on that. So they've got a lot of mythic threads that they can draw on, I think. The second piece, when I think of Order of Hermes, that I think is really important is in Mage, they are the only group that actually has a government. It's a lot of the other traditions are alluded to having some sort of structure or some sort of like code of laws or ethics or means of adjudicating conflict or wrongdoing. The Order of Hermes really has one, and it's kind of functional. And it's a hell of a lot of fun because it's so corrupt.
Yeah, my favorite example of that is if someone were to say, who's the primus of the Euthanatoi pre-Avatar Storm, the answer is Indra Taxing. If someone were to say, who's actually in charge of the Euthanatos, before that, the answer is Senex. So, they have formal political power, and everyone needs to at least notionally pay service to it.
But there's no real appeal process with the Euthanatos, right? Like, if they decide that it's your turn to take a turn on the wheel, that's kind of it for them. Whereas with the Order of Hermes, somebody has to bring charges. Then you go to the tribunal, and there's a bunch of horse trading and some voting, and then they can mete out various kinds of punishment based off of this Byzantine, but still written form of law. And I think that's interesting. I've done a lot of tribunals in my games. Because tribunals are not just, a form of adjudication, a court for the Order of Hermes. They're also an opportunity for advancement, for getting somebody under your thumb, and for just as you mentioned in the Ars Magica episode, just being the pettiest bitch of all of the bitches.
Dr. Chart kind of recoiled a little bit when I'm like, yes, all mages share the feature of being catty bitches. And he's like, I don't know if I go that far. And I'm like, I would.
Well, in my games, frequently people will bring tribunals for very, very small infractions as a form of like political bullshittery, or to advance some other agenda, or to distract from something else that they're doing. So I love a tribunal. So
Good. Michael's Guide to Tribunals is the next book that I want to see after your House Mercere book.
I have some rules written up for tribunals and various means by which people can engage in above board and less than above board behavior at a tribunal.
Yeah.
Not that Hermetics would ever do any of that.
Never.
Masasa.
But the two things as a follow-up to that is we will eventually be doing an episode on law and law keeping within the world of Mage, like mystical societies and how they kind of maintain order given a formal system. I have a special guest speaker for that I really hope can join, someone who has a background in kind of different traditions of law around the world. And the other one is, this is probably going to be one of several episodes. We're going to go through the initial 12 houses here, but there are something like 30. And so I wouldn't be surprised if this got broken up into 2 or 3 discussions. Our outline for just this episode is 18 pages. So we'll see how that goes.
That's the other thing about the Order of Hermes, is that they tend to produce other magical orders, like the Society of Ether, or kind of all of the technocracy.
Oops. Oops. Maybe you should have kept the craft masons, and that could have saved us all a lot of problems. But yeah.
I think the last thing is that the Order of Hermes are troublemakers, and that makes for good story. Love them or hate them, they're not boring.
Yeah.
Which is the cardinal sin of magic. Don't be boring.
Yes, and generally when I level an accusation against a book, it's not because it is bad, but that it's dull. It doesn't have a lot of content that I have the ability to add to my game. Looking at you, revised Cult of Ecstasy.
Ooh.
Anyway, and with that, I guess we should start with one of the granddaddy houses, House Bonisagus, or Bonisagus.
Bonisagus. Bonisagus.
There's no house I say correctly, and there's no house that Adam says the same way as me.
We're gonna have a pronunciation guide along the way, so feel free to follow along at home, kids.
And we are going to go through some basic attributes of each house and then just kind of share our thoughts on how we use them in games, what we like about them. Bonisagus, I just felt stupid doing it. Was
it doesn't have a good mouthfeel, does it?
No, it doesn't. The goose at the end. Bonisagus. I want to make it a J noise. Bonisagus was the mage that discovered the Parma Magica, which within Ars Magica continuity allows for wizards to get together for the first time. The idea is that there is very few defenses against someone else's magic. So basically the first person to kind of light the other guy on fire wins. Mr. Goose discovers a way to store quintessence.
Magus Goose.
Magus Goose discovers a way to store quint and use it for counter magic. It's kind of different in the Ars Magica system, but that's kind of what we get it in Mage, and that is a doable Prime 2. It allows you to create a very narrowly focused quintessence battery, and that exists at least in 2nd edition. And it doesn't quite jive with how I would do it with contemporary stuff, but maybe that's part of the fun of being a member of the Order of Hermes. Their word was unity, and they joined with Magetheascension to form the house at the first conclave. The idea was that Bonisagus would kind of teach them Parma Magica, and then Trianoma would extend the diplomatic hand to say, why don't you join us? Their initial recruiting was from the Gnostics, the cult of Mercury, the Pythagoreans, the Socratics, and scholars of all stripes. Some stayed in the house, others kind of moved on. Their historical location of power, before we get into that, what is a Domus Maga?
Domus Maga is what's known in mage parlance is your ancestral chantry. So in Ars Magica, each of the houses has a mother house or a central chantry that's its center of its operations. They may have other chantries or covenants elsewhere, but the center of their power is going to be their Domus Magna.
And for Bonisagus, it is Durenmar in Germany. And this is a massive library, kind of like an earthly version of Duizotep, because Duizotep hadn't been invented yet. There are a few terms that are moved back and forth between Ars Magica and Mage, so some of them are a little bit messy. In Mage continuity, in their modern form, Duizotep was the only place that held a modern group of any size at the time of the Avatar Storm, or more importantly, at the time of the conflagration in, 1998 or 1997, when we have our digital web outage caused by a whole bunch of Hermetics being pissy at one another. There is literally one group left. They are located at Duizotep, and they are quite potent. Their magical specialty is research. To me, if the Hermetic mantra is, if you're going to do something, be the best at it, theirs would be, if you're going to know something, know the most about it. If houses had merits, I would probably create something like, they cannot botch rolls involving knowledge specialties, or something like that. The Trianome lineage, which is alluded to in the One book, looked after the internal political health of the order, while the other one, focused on research. They are masters of intrigue and ars cupididae. The example they give was they wine you and dine you, and before you know it, you've promised them an F-16 the next day or something like that. They are currently a major house within the order, and they are noted as having been the home of John Dee, Elizabeth I's advisor. See our episode on Elizabethan magic for more. They became home of the survivors of House Golo, which was the precursor to the Society of Ether, when that was no longer a major house. Baldric LaSalle, representative of the order at the Grand Convocation. Only by the agreement of Bonisagus did they agree to only ask for one seat on the emerging Council of the Nine Mystical Traditions. Some other interesting people, Master Malachi ben Yeshua Bonisagus, disappeared in the 1970s, believing the Deep Umbra held the keys to reality, and Paracelsus, the Swiss alchemist and physician, are also members. In this case, Paracelsus was believed to have ascended to oracular status. Now they are a house on the grow, with some members taking on multiple apprentices, giving them the nickname of the Scattered or the Lost House. So, as of the time of the conflagration, their primus, the head of their house, was John Visbali, who was born in 1833 and was an Italian-born Hungarian mage and led the house for almost a century, presumed dead of the conflagration. Within my headcanon, Avis Malone was our best contender, as outlined in Book of Chantries, to be the next primus, listed as one of the only mages besides Porthos who would openly oppose Chiron Mostai and their machinations at Duizatep. So who could the modern one be? I'm just making it up. Primus Aurelia, apprentice to Avis Malone, with the word of Mercere. She's a biracial maga who weaves the subtlest of technomagic into her arts, such that technomancers aren't sure if it's mystic and mystics aren't sure if it's technomantic. She's also an advocate for abandoning the diplomacy research dichotomy in the house and using cultural exploration as a way to improve ties to other traditions. Mercere means to mix. And that is kind of her goal, to bring together a body of them. The sample character I have is Magister Lucius, who is nearly 200, making him one of the oldest mages on this side of Horizon. His word is endurance, and he seeks better methods of life extension. He purports to have found a way to move avatars to a new body, giving an effectively continuous mage lineage, but people view him as somewhere between mad and an infernalist for doing this kind of magic that has never been seen before. What do you think about Bonisagus? Sagus?
I love Bonisagus. I think that they're great. I think that they are your wizard's wizard. I think if you're looking for new players, I think Bonisagus is probably one of the easiest houses to play. They're all about knowledge and alchemy, and I think that there's a lot of pop flavor to them, despite them being sort of constipated librarians. And they have one of the largest libraries. Yeah, I like the sample character a lot too.
Think
He sounds like he's about to get tribunaled, and we all know that I love a tribunal.
As we say,
So
you don't have to be a good character. You have to be an interesting one, though. The biggest crime,
the
being boring.
That's right. The other thing that I really loved that I felt like it was a real missed opportunity, particularly in Sorcerer's Crusade, is the Trianoma lineage.
Mm-hmm.
If you look in Ars Magica, the Trianoma lineage, they have all kinds of cool abilities, particularly within the order, as far as being the political glue that holds this really fractious, really egotistical, really kind of like, as you said, the cattiest bitches with the sharpest elbows, was it?
The sharpest mind with the sharpest elbows, yeah.
Yeah, the Trianoma lineage are are really necessary for keeping the order together and look to its
Mm-hmm.
political health. And they're all about the soft power. And in my games, I actually have a character who plays somebody from the Trianoma lineage, and he's always sort of back channeling and making deals behind the scenes. He's never up front. Like, so if something needs smoothed over, he just has a closed door meeting, and suddenly everyone emerges, and a deal has been struck. So I encourage players to make use of the Trianoma lineage. I think that if you're looking to do politics, that's the lineage to look to.
And what we mean by lineage is this can mean a couple different things. This is kind of an idea that Ars Magica has that Mage doesn't really have. Sometimes it is a literal family, but more often it might be ties of through a chantry, that you may have had a mentor that you can trace all the way back to Trianoma, in the same way that people getting doctorates and so on can say, oh, my doctoral advisor was this person, and theirs was this person, and theirs was this person, who was also in An Officer and a Gentleman with Kevin Bacon or something like that. But
Oh.
so it can mean a bunch of different things, but from my understanding of Ars Magica, when it comes to a lot of these groups, it's basically who was your mentor, who was your mentor's mentor, and so on. If we want to, we can play a game where this is an aspect of Avatar, if you want to have that as being so fundamental, or something like past lives. But usually it is connection through education, I think, for at least the non-familial ones.
The Trianoma lineage are a subfaction within House
Mm-hmm.
Bonisagus, right? So you've got your lab rats and librarians on one side, and they take after their founder, Bonisagus, and then you've got the Trianoma folks who practice her, and they in Ars Magica they have their own special lab text that's like a secret code, like in school, right? these like secret cheat codes, and they also practice in Ars Magica sort of they have special what's known as virtues or merits that go along with that. But they're very, very different than their sort of lab bound companions. But though they represent sort of the two sides of the order, ambition in politics and scholarship in magic.
Yeah, and we could reflect those in games pretty easily in saying, oh, okay, you're from the Bonisagus lineage, buying a subspecialty costs 1 XP less for you. Oh, you're from the Trianomal thing. You, when dealing with anyone else who is awakened, you can substitute a background of your choosing and add 1 to it when trying to do an influence intimidate or something like that to represent that diplomatic skill. Any other thoughts before we talk about your first house, which I will invariably pronounce incorrectly?
No, let's move on to, so before we get to the order shapeshifters, House Bjorner. Say it at home. Bjorner.
Bjorner.
It sounds like some sort of bath product, you know?
Yes, like in some foreign language, it just means literally like good air, and it keeps your bathroom appropriately humidified between usages using Icelandic sea salts or something like that. This is one of Abba's lesser known product extensions.
House Bjorner comes from Ars Magica, and that's where they're most robustly detailed. And the book on them is really, really cool. They have a really unique structure, particularly within the Ars Magica canon. They're quite different than the rest of the houses because they're one of the founding 12, but they're actually not a Latinate house. They're Germanic. They were in Mage continuity founded by Mistress Bjorner because and I really sort of take issue with this. Most of the founders were nobles for some reason, and I don't see how they would have had time to like join the Order of Hermes or let alone practice magic, considering they were like too busy making sure the peasants were producing enough food and like protecting themselves from like the vastly shifting empires that were going on during the 9th century when the order was formed. I mean, this is like right before Charlemagne, so like shit's about to get crazy in Europe. But anyway, this is what the developers have given us, so we'll go with that. So Mistress Bjorner was a goth, and no, I don't mean a proto-hollow one. I mean literally.
I so wish that were the case, but yeah.
I know, right? She was the one goth who showed up to the Pax Hermetica.
Darkness.
I myself am strange and unusual and have a beast inside me. It's a honey badger.
I see a doctor regularly for it, yeah. So what makes them so special?
Their Domus Magna is Sintra in Germany. They were mostly sort of Northern Europe, sort of Celtic area. What makes them really interesting is that they have what's known as a heart beast, and their magical specialty is shapeshifting. And there's a lot of shapeshifting in Ars Magica, but as part of their mystery, by joining the house, you're able to take on an animal form that's sort of a spirit animal. So it could be a hawk, it could be a horse, it could be a lion, it could be anything. But the heart beast is really, really cool. It's a really interesting feature, and it comes with all kinds of magical stuff in Ars Magica. They have an interesting history. Their role within the order, they were mostly warriors, but they became kind of isolationist after the Schism War, which was a civil war within the Order of Hermes where they marched on House Didne for supposed diabolism. And House Bjorner, as sort of a pagan house to the north, not so dissimilar from the druidic Didne, were like, are we next? I think we might be next. So they became kind of more isolationist. And then they defected to the Verbena in 1466. And we don't really hear much more about them, unfortunately. I would have liked to have seen them detailed within the Verbena tradition book. I think that could have been a very cool point of rivalry between the witches and the wizards, but alas, we don't get much.
It's also notable for being one of the only times in Mage where someone goes, "Oh no, you're more like them. You should probably go over there."
Right.
We get a bunch of cases where in Mage people are like, you two look the same. You should be friends. QV all the dream speakers. You're brown. Right. You should be. Or to me, the more interesting ones being the cultists of ecstasy, where the people who are just absolutely whacked out of their brains on mushrooms and wine, and the people who've only inhaled once in the past 27 years and have never touched a woman are like, no, we're basically the same thing. And everyone's like, you sure? You sure? Aesthetics and bacchanalia? Oh, okay, that's fine. And likewise with the Euthanatoi, where they're like, Chakravani? Yeah. These Greek guys? Yeah. Basically the same. So I feel like there should have been more strange bedfellows or like, shouldn't you be over there?
A lot of unkept promises in the Cult of Ecstasy for me.
Yeah.
I was promised something in first edition and got something very different.
So you make mention of shapeshifting. One of the things they are is they are listed as one of kind of the mystery houses. We have the true religions, the societates, and the mystery cults. What makes them a mystery cult, or what does that mean in Ars Magica?
In Ars Magica, the mystery cults, they have a central mystery that they're organized around that was imparted from the founder. So the mystery cults are going to be like Maranita, Criamon, Bjorner, and I'm forgetting what the fourth mystery cult is.
Gerbaton. Can you ever have enough canapes? No,
Yarbaton.
Actually, I have it in front of me. Verdicious.
Oh, yeah, that's right. Yeah, so they all have a central mystery, meaning a magical teaching that one is initiated into, and that's what the mystery cult is. The Societas, they are sort of fellowships that are organized around a central idea, and then there are the true lineages, which are following in the footsteps, literally, of the founder. So they're moving forward that founder's particular idea of what the world should look like.
And do you know what the kind of the mystery abilities are for Bjorner that we might be able to steal for Mage?
Yeah, that's the heart beast. They're able to automatically take the form of an animal of their choosing. But this is more than just shape-shifting it. I guess I would describe it in mage parlance as it's the beast equivalent of the mage's word. So it could be an expression of their avatar or their nature or some combination of those things, right? Perhaps they discover their heart beast by when they select their word.
And at higher levels, this increases to just a general improvement in your awareness of the world around you. You find sensory magics to be much more easy. You're in tune with the sensory umwelt of your animal. You gain the ability to do a partial transformation, where just suddenly your character maybe has a wolf fangs or the ability to balance like a cat or gills or something like that. And I thought that was pretty neat. And it's just one of those things where you just look at Ars Magica and you're like, wow, someone really thought this through in a way I'm not used to.
I mean, Ars Magica is such a delightful, like charming game that just never, I'm not sure why it never quite took on like the way that the World of Darkness did, but there's so much really cool stuff in there that is pretty easy to convert to mage, I think. So
yeah. I think one of the other things that was a little bit unique to Bjorner compared to seemingly a bunch of the other houses is they're peripatetic. They tend to take on a life of wandering. They tend to have a certain amount of self-subsistence, as well as kind of, to me, forming an interesting counterpoint to Maranita. I could see someone taking this in a direction that if House Maranita is there for the study of fairies, maybe, and Tremere or Titulus is for the study of vampires, then your Bjorner they're the one house that has positive relationships with the Garu or the Beast Courts or the Green Courts or something like that. And I think that would be neat if they were the one thing where it's like, yeah, they get along with the werewolves. They don't get along with anyone else. And I think that would be a neat way to take it.
yeah, they're really sort of the odd wizards out when it comes to Order of Hermes. They fit well. They're an interesting counterbalance, but they're definitely different. You know, particularly later in Ars Magica, they're much more sort of almost, I would say, Dream Speaker or Verbena-esque in sort of their worldview. It's still very connected to the primal, but they're still very, very focused on magic and the making of magic. But it's much more in tune to the natural world, particularly to the animals.
And it kind of shows you if you wanted to play a game that was just the Order of Hermes and you called that the Council, and every house became a tradition, that you would still have a perfectly playable game. That's how much material we have to run with.
Yeah, yeah.
So if I were looking for an interesting Bjorner character or a sample that I could look at, what would you recommend, Michael?
Let's see. How about Tamil Hawkmoon,
Okay.
whose heart beast is a hawk, and he specializes in traveling through the Umbra, and he acts as a guide for mages seeking who are looking to dodge trouble, let's say, right? They're looking to get out of Dodge, and
Yeah.
they contact Tamil Hawkmoon, and he knows maybe he's in touch with some of the paths of the Wick, or he knows where that shallowing is, and he can get you out fast, and he'll get you wherever you're going safe. Because that's one thing that I feel like Mage talks about, but it never emphasizes that the other worlds are supposed to be dangerous. They're not really supposed to be an escape, right? But yet what's described to us doesn't really feel all that dangerous.
Yeah. To me, I think Tamil would be an interesting character because House Bjorner may be some of the only Hermetics that truck with Gaian brood, that they're familiar with how stag and wolf get along, and how cockroach and unicorn go against each other, where anyone can keep track of the court of the tarot, or the court of the zodiac or something. They're the only ones, as you mentioned, who are familiar with maybe with the past of the Wick. And I don't think there'd be anything cooler than a Verbena being like, hey, I know a secret, only we know how to do it. And suddenly like, ta-da! It's like, not just you anymore.
Yeah. But they won't tell the other Hermetics.
No, they wouldn't understand. They would need to be initiated into it, but just that kind of that little thorn in your side.
Right.
And I forgot about House Castrovinci as being the one Christian inflected house, and we'll get to them in the fullness of time.
House what?
House Castrovinci from the Order of Hermes tradition book. I think they were listed as being part of Ex Miscellanea in the 14th century.
How the hell did I miss that one?
It just popped up on the wiki, and it's like right there. I'm like, oh, son of a gun. Yeah, I would love for Bjorner to still be in there. Any other thoughts before we do another house?
No, I really wish that they had kept House Bjorner,
Okay.
at least in the Verbena, but they're always available for your games, folks.
And next we're going to talk about House Flambeau, or Flambeau.
Flambeau. Say it at home, everybody. Flambeau.
House Flambeau has an interesting origin in that Flambeau was seeking to drive Moors from his native Iberia after his family was killed by invading will workers. Eventually, he sought revenge on all mages and stacked up quite a body count before Trianoma is like, how about instead of killing mages, you befriend them? And Trianoma, being a rather compelling gal, was like, how about you let go, join us, and we will give you some fantastically interesting things to explode. And Flambeau is like, you have made me an offer. Their mother house is located in Castrosolis in France, but their historical base of power, or their geographic one, is suggested to be the Iberian Peninsula, but with a heavy Persian influence through the beliefs of Zoroaster. Their magical specialty is kind of war and fire, and they're open to stealing from a lot of practices, which I am pleased by. It often makes a nod to Zoroastrian belief, although just about any belief that involves fire and warfare from east of the Caucasus has seemingly a place within their house. They are less dedicated to maybe the hermetic aspects and more focused on the fiery aspects. If it makes something blow up, they'll be able to make it fit. If the house had merits, I would give them one where they can add their entire dice pool to a fiery or destructive magic effect, regardless of paradigm, when they are assisting someone with the right spheres. So normally you have to share a paradigm if you want to be able to do a magical effect. This is a case where I'm saying, if they share the instrument of kaboom, that maybe they can make it work anyway.
Is it just an instrument, or could it be a whole sphere, like the sphere of Gon?
I'm certainly in favor of that, although the sphere of boom, that seems to be the preserve of House Titulus. But yeah, it would be great for someone to be rolling Arete and someone else to be rolling Wits plus Firearms and be like, this M5 magic system has certainly gone in one direction. They, along with Tremere or Tremere, annihilated House Deadney. In M20, they are listed as the Warriors of the Order, and in earlier editions, they're closer to the tactical weapons specialists, with the idea of Titulus being the guiding hand of their firepower. So in Blood Treachery, the Titulans are often guiding Flambeau, whose shotguns are the masters of the 10th sphere, as they quickly discovered that that's a good way to stop a vampire without incurring paradox. Theirs is a dualistic tradition blending light as fire and light as ability to see. They're listed as the largest house, and to me, this actually changes the nature of the order in the same way that the idea that the goat kitties are the largest contingent of the Nefandi. you're like, okay, so your average Hermetic is a Flambeau under 30 or something like that. And you're
Oh,
like,
Lord.
yeah, you're like, oh, I dated a few of those. House Flambeau is full of daredevils, rebels, and disaster workers. And theirs is the house of people so enraged by the world that they feel they have to change it. Notably, this includes Porthos Fitz Empress as a member. In 1E, their goal was very much the destruction of the technocracy. In later editions, they're kind of presented as a little bit rudderless, and everyone is kind of pursuing their own kind of change they want to have in the world. We don't get a listed Primus in the Revised Tradition book, so I'm going to make one. Sarush Zand, tied to the historical dynasty. Their word is Atash Feshan, the Persian term for volcano, which I think literally means fire spreader. He is the first Primus raised in a Zoroastrian familial tradition in a millennium and interprets fire as being the spark of change in the world. He rails against Western imperialism and beliefs, rightly or wrongly, and believes that their Hermetic framework can provide tools of self-determination. Although in the wake of the Arab Spring and receding global democracy, he feels that this is a sign to double down rather than reconsider what he is doing. The sample character I created was Magus Ferris, whose word is resonance and focuses on the destructive power of runaway feedback, whether that be in an electrical system, a stereo, or in a culture. Ferris believes that there are ways of jamming the activities of the syndicate by locking money into kind of these cyclical loops, sapping them of potency. This is an adopted name as they're constantly on the run from Chinese censors, where they grew up in Guangzhou, and have been introduced to the Hermetic arts via the esoteric order of reading stereo instructions. They think Catherine Blass should have been Hermetic.
Wow, that's a deep cut there with Catherine Blass.
I try. So what do you think about House Flambeau?
I love House Flambeau's worldview. They're totally Mancunian. They're just sort of like it's light and dark and there's no shades of gray. I mean, there's also like touches of Gnosticism within them insofar as they're just like, this world sucks and we're going to burn it all down. And if we destroy the technocracy, then like the true potential of the world is going to blossom, right? So like reborn in flame, like, and they continue to be the totally bananas like Gonzo spirit of second edition, right? And to be honest, I don't know why the traditions haven't kicked them out. They're so crazy. They're so crazy. And but I've never played one, but I've always wanted to. And here's what I would do if I played somebody in House Flambeau. I believe maybe this is just my headcanon, but I feel like there is a mention, I think in the Revised Order of Hermes book, that there is sort of a cult within the House Flambeau that practices entropy shadow magic. And so they're just as destructive and nutty. They're just very subtle about it, right? So suddenly, like, they show up at that technocracy construct, and suddenly the foundation cracks and the building sort of collapses in on itself. And they're just whistling past the graveyard, smoking a cigarette.
Yeah, the house produces a disproportionate number of martyrs, which isn't necessarily a good thing. As someone who plays video games online a lot, one of the things I constantly look at is my KD ratio, the number of other players I have killed to the number of times I die. And generally your goal is at least 2 to 1. And to me, House Flambeau is like, no, we can do better. Most other people want a KD ratio of something like any to 0, and they're like, it's just a cycle. But yeah, I do think it would have an interesting Thanatos tie-in where someone goes, this is not my first life to lose. And them potentially being the one part that reaches out to the Toftani to be like, is interested in subjugating spirits? Check. Thinks the world needs more explosions? Check. But ultimately, there might be this Arab versus Persian cultural battle or something like that. There's any number of reasons why it wouldn't have happened. Just simple pride on both sides, the Toftani never wanting to be subsumed into anything whatsoever. But again, it's another one of those cases where you're like, if you squint, this is pretty close to another group we already have, but certainly with that Hermetic twist to it.
Yeah, that is sort of what's interesting about it is that, I think that the stereotype of Flambeau sort of precedes itself, but if you actually look into the belief system, it's much weirder and deeper than you'd expect. Like crazy, and they kind of sound like terrorists, but still awesome. They make awesome player characters. I also wonder if they would have relationships to the Court of Fire, to one of the Elementive courts.
Oh, okay.
I know if I was House Flambeau, I definitely would be making some friends over there, particularly to bring those dudes back in the world. to start burning up some technocracy, some of that crust of reason that is choking all the magic.
Yeah, and it's also one of those ones where it's always good to have interesting cases of what would a marauder in your group look like. Like, and how do we differentiate that from just someone who has magical potency and high resonance? But I like the Court of Fire angle to that, being like, oh, okay, yeah, most Hermetics are familiar with the spires, but what about what is below them? And they're somewhat unique, maybe in that regard.
Well, I wonder if they'd cut a deal and moved their chantry, sort of during the Sorcerer's Crusade to out there,
Uh-huh.
maybe created a steading in the Court of Fire or something like that. So, but yeah, I'm always in favor of things getting weirder and more like cosmic. So, rein me in if you need to.
See Riddle of the Sphinx. So what house do you want to talk about next, Michael?
Let's talk about staying at home, folks. Mercere or Mercere, my favorite Hermetic house. So House Mercere or House Mercere was founded by Lord, we actually get a first name for him in the Order of Hermes tradition book, Lord Henri Mercere, and their Domus Maga is Harco in Piedmont, Italy, and that's of course from Ars Magica. And they were pretty much everywhere. And their magical specialty, they had a sort of two magical specialties here. One was the Mercurian magic that they learned from the cult of Mercury, and they're sort of the holders of all of that. But the other thing that they do is the sphere of bureaucracy. Which is a completely non-magical magic. They are the administrators of the order in Ars Magica, and their house is actually mostly made up of what's known as unawakened redcaps. And those are soldiers, scribes, household managers, just various administrative folks who sort of keep the wheels of the order running. And this is, again, just another missed opportunity, in my opinion, from Mage. The technocracy has its extraordinary citizens, and I really wish that they had retained sort of the traditions version of that with the red caps. Because one of the things that the red caps do is they function as messengers. And this was particularly important during the Middle Ages, perhaps less so in the modern world, but I could still see that why the traditions would have use for sleepers who are educated enough, because the red caps were trained just like as if they had the gift in Ars Magica, as if they were awakened, but they weren't. So they understood magical theory. They could speak and read and write in Latin. So they were fantastic guides or guards or general people to have around your chantry that can do various things that the mages may not necessarily have time to do or have time to develop the expertise. And anybody who I know who works in an office, if you have a scheduler or a front desk person, please be nice to them. Their job is tough. Yeah. Their job is not only tough, but that takes real skill. I can't manage a calendar like these people. So
yeah, in elementary school, when we did group projects and someone was supposed to keep us on tasks and to be the timekeeper of the group, you'd be like, that's stupid. We don't actually need those. And then as time goes on in life, you realize those people are called project managers and they make way more than you. So
yeah,
so
I mean,
not a dump stat.
And if you have ambitions for taking over the world, or at least reality, or maybe just your local city, having a group of project managers who are sort of in the know about your secret Illuminati-esque conspiracy, that could definitely be helpful. So that's the one that's again, like I said, a missed opportunity for the Order of Hermes. So in Mage canon, they fell into Ex Miscellaneous in the 1600s and then were subsumed into House Fortunae in the 1930s. You can see vestiges of them in two ways. First of all, there's personnel in House Fortunae, which we'll talk about later. And the other thing is that one of my favorite things about the Order of Hermes revised book is they talk about the third degree. So the Order of Hermes has a lot of apprentices who just don't awaken for whatever reason, and so they kind of languish in the third degree, and they talk about these third degrees who are fully educated maguses, but they haven't quite achieved awakened magic. And of course, the Order of Hermes is you either awaken and move up, or you don't. It's very sink or swim. But these third degrees have carved out for themselves kind of a niche as bureaucrats. So you can see a little bit, and I've made great use of that in my games where the Hermetics will, dismiss this third degree who's been kicking around the order, and knows more than a fourth or fifth degree about how to operating the machinery of the order, and they dismiss him and they regret it. because when they show up at a tribunal, suddenly the whole tribunal is against them and they have no idea why. So there's a lot of fun can be had there for sure.
Yeah, if you're going for that fourth dot and you're paying like what 8x and it's 32 XP, that's a lot of backgrounds you can increase for the same XP amount. As impressive as the fourth dot in any of the spheres are.
And you're not worried about having to write that grimoire or picking up your mentor's dry cleaning or translating some obscure text. No, you're not worried about any of that stuff.
The resources background is paradox free. To me, if I were to use a House Mercere, one of the things that it would be is, and one of the things that's kind of neat in Ars Magica is people find people with the gift to be menacing. Kind of in the same way that werewolves, even in human form, have this kind of aura before even the delirium hits, where people are like, oh, that's something going on there. Just having someone who's familiar with your wants and needs, but doesn't freak people the F out, is a useful thing. So you may have a House Mercere member who is responsible for keeping your chantry on good relationships with your neighbors. They could be a skilled sorcerer or psychic or have true faith if you still want to give them supernatural powers. The other thing to me is House Mercere, if we want to talk about logistics, this is the house where it's like, okay, yeah, you might have correspondence for when you just need to get your car from one part of the planet to another. What if you need to move a cruise ship? What if you need to move a whole ass dragon to the other side of the Umbra? And this is the group that can do that kind of logistics. Or one of those things where it is so sensitive you don't want to risk paradox. They were the ones who might have been responsible for coordinating the movement of Dewizatep to the Shade Realm of Forces or the Martian Penumbra. So even without magic, they were still the ones who made sure that the wards were all in place. So even necessarily without the gift, they have that benefit, and they don't count as witnesses, which is terribly useful. This could be also the group, to switch it another way, they're really the marketing branch of the Order of Hermes. They're the ones who remind society that systematic magic is sexy. That like, oh, you mean if I just study real hard, I'll be able to change the world, and none of this BS where I got an MBA and I thought I would get a promotion, but no one actually cares. This is actually the real stuff where if I learn these 6 ancient languages and Enochian, I can start unlocking stuff. To me, House Mercere, in the same way that the Society of Ether and Virtual Adepts tried to advance science fiction to give people the idea, maybe House Mercere is behind contemporary urban fantasy. Or something like that. That is their mass project.
There's certainly a very literary house, lots of letter writing going on there.
Yes, and without the esotericism of House Shea or something like that, where it's like, okay, you wrote me a letter. It switches between 3 languages. Did you notice that? Did you accidentally include Sumerian in there? So, do we get any notable members of House Mercere?
Yeah, so not in the Mage canon, but Marco Polo was perhaps a member. There was also, so within Ars Magica canon, the House Mercere is also notable because the only members who are awakened are actual descendants of the founder. So the awakened members are usually quite small. And he only had 2 children that we know of, a son and a daughter. So they would be notable. In the game I ran, they're named Almarilik and Maya. Some other members I'm going to make up are Ulissa, which was a legendary red cap. And she was considered an unofficial co-founder of the house and a kind of patron saint of redcaps due to her devotion to duty. It said that she ascended with the blessing of Hermes for her devotion and one of the few unawakened mortals known to do so. She founded a society within the House Mercere of respected messengers that venerate her legend called the Order of Ulissa.
Oh, that's neat. I think that would be real neat to have in Mage. Like, what would it mean for a mortal to ascend or something like that, or to receive oracle status? I also like the idea of House Mercere being the umbral diplomats, where they're the ones who just carry on the correspondences with the spires to be like, yes, I understand that my master has locked your master within a magical device, but don't worry, we're taking good care of him. Here's a picture, here's a copy of him holding up a newspaper, and in his absence, here's some quintessence, stop complaining. And that may be what they do, or they may be the masters of, as you had mentioned, the sphere of bureaucracy in both mundane and supernatural settings.
For Primus, we've got Prima Valeria Bruni, and she's a practical woman who's been running the house successful for almost 40 years. Her father, Ettore, was the last Primus, and she grew up knowing that she would probably take over for him when he died. She's awakened, but tries not to involve herself in the affairs of Magi or the politics of the tribunal, choosing to concentrate instead on seeing that her house and the covenant is running smoothly. She has a large family, and her second eldest daughter, Vittoria, will probably assume her duties when she dies, as she is her mother's chief assistant and knows best what needs to be done to keep House Mercere and the Order of Hermes well organized and not at each other's throats.
I do like the idea of that familial line of like a gift so powerful that it is able to move down generations.
In the last Mage game that I ran, one of the characters was actually he had joined House Chaos in Rebellion, but he was from a large, complicated House Mercere family that was full of if you can imagine the HBO show Succession, but with wizards, that was why he fled.
Shut up and take my money. The next house we're talking about is House Quaesitor, which was founded by Archmage Guernicus, whose followers believed in a rigid, structured form of magic, and that by discerning all the laws of reality, one would be able to control them. They quickly became the legal branch of the tradition, and although they never run the order, they kind of help determine who does. They're kind of kingmakers in chief. They help prevent the order from falling to infighting and backstabbing by providing a impartial-ish third party to adjudicate disputes. When Michael was talking earlier about the fun of having a tribunal, one of the things to me that makes Hermetic law interesting is the idea of precedent, that you may have a game where you're going and trying to find previous cases that are similar and bringing up little bits of evidence, and that's what your research roles go into. And you can have all sorts of weird ones, like the case of Master Vilnius versus the Zigrogalar or something, and having all of these absolutely bizarre precedents to call upon.
Well, because the order has the code itself, which is the main body of laws, and then it has the peripheral corrigenda, which is all of the centuries, and by centuries, we're talking 800 years of tribunal interpretations of the code that go along with it. Mm-hmm. And that's what the Quaesitors are all about. So.
Yep. And owning a pet owl. Their mother house is in Magvalus, which is suggested to be in northern Italy atop a mountain with very steep cliffs. I assume it would be something like the Piedmont region or the Pyrenees or something like that. Their current locus of power is Stuttgart, Germany, where their fixed hierarchy very much emanates from, where each of the 7 magistrati oversees 2 praetors who oversees at least 2 additional quaesitors. They meet monthly, and that is also when, if they have to dole out a lethal punishment of some sort, that's when they do it. Their magical specialty is law and justice, and some would say the idea of balance or order. They are sometimes referred to as the Ma'ati, after the Egyptian word Ma'at, which is kind of interpreted as balance or right order to the cosmos. They believe the universe specifically wants to be understood, and that their magic is marked, for instance, by the use of blindfolds, and that the law is often enforced with the explosive presence of a umbru tied to judgment, whether it be an angel or something similar. To me, if they had a merit, it would be something like if they do something that is vulgar with witnesses, but there is only one witness, and that person in some important way is a lawbreaker, it is treated as coincidental or vulgar without witnesses. Their rites are often so destructive and vulgar that they do them as a group. Gilgul is one of the few cases where a bunch of Quaesitori will have the opportunity to get together. They are quite skilled at correspondence, and they are also capable of administering kind of the Hermetic version of a geash, a kind of binding oath. Within the order, they are notable for having a familiarity with law, but not being very good judges of character. They okay the attack on Diadne during the Schism War. This wasn't long after their founding, and it took them quite some time to gain the respect of the rest of the order. They had a initiation known as the Gavel for the long time, which was an intense initiation involving answering 100 hard legal questions in essay form. And now their role is more to figure out how to get groups to work together when dealing with dubious motives and ambiguous morality. To me, this was a group that was inclined not towards madness when they go into quiet, but maybe denial, that their view of the universe is so strict that elements that don't fit into it, they just kind of stop seeing. They are notable for their primus, Ishak ibn Thoth, being around post-Avatar Storm and being arguably the most potent Hermetic that we have on the record books.
Is he an Archmage?
Yes. One of the only active archmages with that 6 dot, I think, in spirit. Continuing the idea of only being good at judging law and not character, Ishak okays the attack on the Tremere in blood treachery. Oops. Eventually, Ishak sees the error of his ways when Lord Gilmore is like, "You idiots, I'm a Titlean, and even I think this war is stupid." Proving archmastery isn't enough to make you a good leader. The sample character I came up with was Anna Hardrick, who is a crusader trying to lead an update to the Hermetic Code, especially in the wake of the blood treachery incident and the Second Masasa War. Her word is breath, meaning that law must be a living document, putting her at odds with much of the tradition. Usually prone towards twilight and madness as she spends hours staring at texts, trying to get their revealed truth to come to her. Noted echoed flaws for her is that anything she writes down or that is written down about her becomes garbled. So she's one of the few hermetics that generally does phone calls and keeps an audio diary.
Oh, I love phone calls.
As do I. To Zoom.
Yeah, I think the Quaesitors are such great foils and sort of flawed but well-meaning folks,
Yes.
but they just cannot seem to get out of their own way, and they just keep repeating the same historical mistakes over and over. They're just like the Order of Hermes is like, let's do something stupid. Like march on the rogue house that we already lost a war once when we were at the height of our power.
They strike me as the house that says, well, there's nothing in the rules that say that dogs can't play basketball. So, yeah, not too great in that regard.
Yeah, I frequently use the Quaesitors. In the Mage game I'm running currently, they're trying to reopen this censured chantry, and the Quaesitor is frequently having to do paperwork to try to make sort of these things happen. And I frequently have him show up and pull out some ephemera from the peripheral code about, that is completely contradictory. Like he'll be like,
Yeah.
well, in one judgment they said this, but in another judgment they said this, and then here's a third one. Good luck.
Yeah.
He never gives you an answer. He just sort of riddles you this sort of legal ephemera and wanders off. So more than once the Trianoma guy has tried to seduce him, and he's just sort of shaken his head and says, "You're gonna have to do better than that, bud."
Yeah. Yeah. So what do we have next on your side?
Criamon. Lord Criamon, who attended the Pax Hermetica, another founding house. Their Domus Magna is the Cave of Twisting Shadows in the Alps. And they're kind of all over the place, but mostly sort of in the Alps, kind of doing their thing. In the 5th edition canon, they have some ties to the Sufis in the Middle East. Their specialty is time magic, and their role within the order is they are seers, and they're known for mysteriously tattooing themselves as a rite of passage or for important magical mile markers or achievements. In Mage canon, they have been in Ex Miscellaneous since the start of Mage. We don't get a whole lot of information about them, although they do all go blind, I think, during the Reckoning metaplot, if I remember correctly.
Blind or mad, yes, when Ravnos, when Zephythesora wakes.
Yeah, but and Mage just sort of serves that to you, and it's not enough to make a meal of, but it sure is a juicy morsel. So I think Criamon in Ars Magica, again, another lost opportunity here. Criamon is famously known for actually welcoming Wizard's Twilight, or what's known in Mage as quiet. They take drugs and do wild dancing and are generally just sort of whirling dervishes of hermetic magic. And they think that there's wisdom to be found in Wizard's Twilight, and they cultivate it, and they seem to prosper as a result of it. But they also tattoo themselves. So you're never sure if that guy who's got face tattoos is Criamon or if he just got out of jail. Or he could be just Post Malone.
Yeah. And the thing that was kind of interesting is Ars Magica gives an upside to Wizard's Twilight. There is a way to emerge from it where you gain experience and you gain insight and maybe information about a mystery or something like that. We don't really have that in Mage. It's not like you quieted so hard you get an extra dot of esoterica. So that is kind of a distinct difference between the two.
Yeah, I wish there was a closer relationship between quiet and seekings.
Yeah.
That there were sort of two sides of the same coin, and when you enter into this sort of, because I was working with this in another Storytellers Vault supplement that I've been working on as far as like what is a seeking and where does it happen? You know, like, is it all in your mind? Is it in the dream realms? Is it somewhere out in the deep umbra? And Mage gives various answers about this. Like, first edition is especially wacky. Sometimes, like, you literally disappear. Sometimes it's happening in the world. Sometimes you're just
Hmm.
in a coma. Like, so like, where is the seeking happening, right? And like, why isn't that a space where there could be real risk, where you can emerge from quiet or you can emerge with wisdom or both? Perhaps quiet is a seeking that is taking a lot longer to work out than you expected, right? So Criamon was an example of like of folks if you're going to go to and be like, hey, I feel I'm a little stuck or my mentor's a little stuck. Can you help me? And they'll show up and be like, well, let me tell you about this tattoo, son.
Yeah.
This mermaid on, let me make this mermaid on my arm dance. Or yeah.
Yeah. His name was Brian for 3 sweet, sweet nights in the Caribbean. Yeah. Um, the other thing I like about Criamon and Ars Magica is they're kind of almost better than the cultists in that they also want to like tear down the feudal system. Because they're like, stealing is wrong. That's what the feudal system fundamentally is. The acquisition of wealth or power and pleasure are distractions that corrupt us. So they're these weird, like, proto-communist tear down the system people. And they also have this Gnostic angle where they're like, time is circular and magi have the duty to help people escape from its trap. So, like, the central mystery that Criamon kind of posited is what is outside of time. And I think that's a fascinating question to just stare at. So you see this tattooed guy who's on weed who can't seemingly pay attention. And you're like, what is he doing? Oh, he's trying to escape from the suffering of reality. And he's also bringing down a South American dictatorship in his mind or something like that. I think that makes it a little bit more interesting than just like, he's your kooky uncle.
Yeah, I mean, that was always sort of like I said, the unkept promises of the cult of ecstasy is I'm always just sort of like, what are you all doing? What's the central idea here? Like there's something going on, but
Yep.
I just can't figure it out. Whereas with Criamon, we've got a lot more to work with as far as like we have principles and we have things that we want to accomplish, and we're doing this, we're not just like doing drugs and having visions. You know, we're
Yep.
doing something with this. We're going to tear down the feudal system.
And I feel like in a strange way, they were also the ones most likely because they believe in the idea of final transmission, which is where you pass all of your wisdom to the house in some way, shape, or form because they believe just the world is full of mysteries. It's not like their insights are not mutually exclusive in a way that I think some of the other houses did. So it would be weird to be this like, what is the largest accumulation of grimoires in existence? House Criamon. Or something like that. It just has centuries across dozens of languages and a dozen different faith traditions. These texts of seers, and that basically you join by going through and finding the one that resonates with you. And that it becomes more or less a house of grimoires. And that is your initiation. And what you mentioned earlier, like, yeah, you can come study with us for a year. I do like the idea that they do list that anyone can come to the Cave of Twisting Shadows for a year and just kind of ponder the riddles of House Criamon.
Well, I also wonder if you would be both encountering avatars at strange points in time or various members at strange points in time. Like the master that trained you suddenly appears to you as an apprentice and now you must train him, and there's all kinds of like timey-wimey, paradoxy stuff that could be done with this house that I think would be a lot of fun and would be very weird. So,
Yeah, they also have an interesting system basically for hobgoblins, which they refer to as adulterations, which are you come out of Twilight and something comes with you. And if you're going to possibly emerge with an extra dot in a sphere, I think possibly emerge with a new nemesis is also a pretty good one.
yeah, I always felt the hobgoblins. What was that? You did an episode about a bananas comic book that was more mage than mage. What was it called?
Oh, Department of Truth.
Department of Truth, yeah, right, where they do their magic and and a byproduct of it are these like sort of thought forms or you know
Oh yeah, the lizard people come out
right.
because you tried to open the gate to Babylon.
I love it so much. It just so we're not going to discuss lizard people and my weird obsession for them. Let's just move on. Yeah, I always felt hobgoblins should be more like that. Like, because, like, oh, yeah, there are things that only the mage can see. No, I don't think that's good enough. I think that, like, maybe sure, like a low level one, but like at some point, other people start to see them and they're going to come and be like, is this your fucking hobgoblin, dude? Because, because it is not chill. This
Yeah.
hobgoblin is not chill, and you're getting
Yeah.
tribunaled.
No, I really like that as a mechanic that should pop up in games. Like, yeah, you do periodically get random notice that you're about to be jumped in an alleyway, but on the flip side, last time you emerged from quiet, there were a whole bunch of data eaters that went through and just destroyed everyone's personal correspondences or something like that. Now you've got some pretty pissed chantry mates.
So for Primus, I had Primus Ellen Fang, who leads the house, but in the current period, there's too few numbers for it to really have much structure. But what they do have is they have recently rediscovered the Cave of Twisting Shadows in the Swiss Alps, and they're now walking its strange paths again, but for reasons are unknown. But they're certainly learning something. And they are now producing new alchemical tattoos that represent these new insights.
Do you want to do a quick overview of what the Cave of Twisting Shadows is?
I don't know that much about it. Hold on, let me pull that up.
Yeah, just like it's the Regio.
It has a Regio?
So to translate it into Mage, I would say that it's more or less this inherited horizon realm where there are these entities of shadow that commune with the mages that may or may not offer insight. But I like the idea that your mage doesn't become a wraith and they haven't quite passed on to one of the afterworlds. Maybe this is where the avatar chills before it moves on to its next embodiment, or at least some selection of them, or maybe just those of House Criamon, and they are available for like reflection and introspection for a period.
Yeah, that would be really interesting, particularly if that's how they transmit the final transmission, right? Is that you
Yeah.
must remain a shade in the house for a decade or 100 years after your death, and to be of use to the house as sort of the price of your initiation. Wow, wouldn't that be cool?
It's an interesting answer to the Akashic Record, too. To
Oh
be like,
yeah.
you're not the only ones that can have a weird thing.
Yeah, that was another thing I always hoped we would get more mechanics on was like they talk about like the Akashic having access to the record and we kind of figure out what it is, but no real mechanics to it's never gamified in any way, and that was always sort of disappointing to me.
Yeah. Yeah. We've been talking for over an hour.
Yeah.
Who knew we'd have so
About
much
the
to
Order of
say?
Hermes. There's a lot going on here. So,
Yeah. And I'll just include a note. And next we're going to talk about House Tremere. And we can pick this up whenever works for you.
Okay. All right. I'll be
So
in
sorry
touch.
for starting late, but we got the
We
outline.
did. We did. Yes. Yeah. So, yeah.
This has been Mage the Podcast, where each House of Hermes comes with 4 bedrooms, 3.5 baths, a finished basement, small fierce dragons that guard the stoop against package thieves, and central air. Our show is made possible by our executive producers, whose esteemed ranks you can join at patreon.com/magethepodcast. These include the oracles of the following minor houses inspired by obscure vocabulary from Latin. Bad Company, Oracle of House Squamager, keepers of the Order's carefully hidden underwater chantries. Banbandolo, Oracle of House Sesquiplex, who receive an additional half-dot in their affinity sphere for all the good that does them. Buck Gregory, Oracle of House Kikotokinibus, who provide accompaniment to Sertiman duels by playing on reed pipes which slowly poison anyone else who tries to use them. Christopher Phillips, Oracle of House Hederifer, gardener mages tasked with maintaining the extensive and often sentient colonies of ivy that grow on the outside of many chantry walls. Derek Semsek, Oracle of House Murkus, pacifists who cut off their thumbs to twist fates such that they will never see combat. John Cap, Oracle of House Betisandus, known for their prowess at transforming into sugar beets and other tubers as an end unto itself. Guy Stewart, Oracle of House Subductus Superkilocarptor, critics of the Order who can deflate an apprentice's self-worth with the simple raise of an eyebrow. Jason Vines, Oracle of House Zardarom, specialist healers who address the bony swellings in the legs of other mages, familiars, and custodes. Mikhail, Oracle of House Queptora, whose mastery of time magic allows them to always be about to have already begun their workings. Sean Gallagher, Oracle of House Necabus, they will kill anyone, anywhere. They just love killin'. Spartacus, Oracle of House Quisquilii, valued for their divination skills using small twigs, trinkets, and actual garbage. And the crew of Erebus, Oracle of House Confariationis, always holding charity bake sales that both fund the Order and bind customers through entropy-laced cornbread. along with Archmaster Andrew Edelstein, Archmaster Berto, Archmaster Brado the Blue, Archmaster Dan Svensson, Archmaster Leroy Bryce, Archmaster Morgan Around, Archmaster Simon Strand, Archmaster Wolf Larryson, Alex, Alexia, Ambiversion, Andrews S., Blaze Hibbert, Bryce Perry, Bubba the Pale One, Chartan, Sig, Cromwell the Archaeologist, Curtis Hendricks, Daniel Cuppen, Daniel Scribner, Darren Hennessy, David Roy, Dennis Osborne, Ian Robertson, EBG, Eli Levenger, Eric Schwenk, Fozzie Berra, George Lara, Gray Trilligate, Henry Kraft, Ia Bull, James B., Jason Duncan, Jason Kennedy, Jenna F., Jeremy Z., Jervis Johnson, Joshua Rotella, Kathleen Halperin, Kel Reek, Kevin Fitzpatrick, Chris Kinner, Leslie Weatherstone, Laws and Stuff, Lorgra Aurelian, Manel Canos, Matthew Proyle, Maurice Hopkins, Melissa Krause, Michael Parker, Nibera, Nikita Klaimanov, Patrick McNamara, Rachel Grace, Ricardo, Rob H., Ryan Kendi, Ryan Stray, Samuel Tobin, Seven Nessus, Spartacus, Starfish, Stephen Carton, That's Real Nito, Tyler Bryan, and Will Vincent. Our EP shoutout this week is to Fozzie Berra. I noticed that your moniker had the same number of syllables and letters as mozzarella, so I decided to select some facts about that hallowed cheese and some about just bears in general, and mix them up to see what happened. For example, did you know that low moisture bears can be kept refrigerated for up to a month, although some shredded low moisture bears are sold with a shelf life of up to 6 months? Or that mozzarella sometimes communicates with visual displays such as standing upright, which exaggerates the individual's size? The chest markings of some species may add to this intimidating display. Fresh bear can be heard to make a distinct squeaky sound when it is chewed or rubbed, and injuries caused by mozzarella are rare but widely reported. There is evidence of prehistoric mozzarella worship, though this is disputed by archaeologists, and fresh bear, recognized as a traditional specialty guaranteed since 1996 in the European Union, is available usually rolled into a ball of 80 to 100 grams or about 6 centimeters in diameter. Anyway, the next time I engage in this exercise of confounding dairy products with charismatic megafauna, Fozzie Berra, I'll think of you. If you super liked this episode or super didn't, drop us a line at magethepodcast@gmail.com or talk to us at magethepodcast.bisky.social on Bluesky. We have a vigorous Discord community at discord.me/magethepodcast. If you like us, please give us a review on the platform of your choosing or tell a friend about us. Also go to magethepodcast.com for show notes and all of our previous shows. The road is long and ascension awaits.